it's hot, and I love this so much, and I miss it so much. And then some fireworks started going on. And she kind of shifted a little bit, and she said, those fireworks make me nervous because they sound just like gunshot, and I've been shot at. And I said, I need to know your story. And she said, oh, I tell my story a lot. And I said, I know a whole bunch of ladies that are going to story. So that's why she's here. And I'll just read you her bio really quick if you didn't read it. We sent it out. Shoua Ellis is originally from Laos, but is Hmong, one of the mountain tribes of southern China, northern Laos, and Vietnam. The eighth of 9 children, Shoua lived in Laos until the age of 8. She is a survivor of the secret war in Laos, which took place during the Vietnam era. Shoua emigrated to the United States in 1980. She grew up and graduated from high school in Virginia, and then in 1991 attended BYU, where she met her husband Michael. After they were married, they decided to raise a family in Utah. Shoua worked as a telephonic interpreter for 22 years before she switched careers and is now working for Molina Healthcare in her spare time. She's an interpreter, translator, and inspirational speaker. So we'll let her tell you lots more.
Shoua?
Okay, all right. So thank you, Debbie. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here and share, my story with you.
I'm so excited. This is going to be so fun.
And normally I'm actually more composed, but because of what's happening in Afghanistan, that's where I've been. So I'm sorry if I get a little emotional, but yes, I'm Hmong and I'm from Laos, and we live in the mountains of Laos for as far back as I can remember, and I can remember when I was 3, and even that far back because my baby sister was born at that time. And actually the night before she was born, there was these soldiers that had actually camped out near our home because they needed a fireplace to cook. And so my mom and them, trying to make me not feel so bad that we're gonna have a new baby, said, hey, those soldiers that was here last night, they left a baby for you. And so for the longest time, I told my sister she was adopted. She was like, you guys don't love me as much? Anyways, but I was 3, and my mom gave me a set of rules, and she said, if anybody ever approach you and ask you if you were your father's daughter and mention his name, you are to deny. And if they ask, who your parents are, you cannot reveal who we are to them. And I never understood that, but I just stay that way. And she said, and then if you hear gunshots, run in the opposite direction. And if we get separated, I will find you. And I've always lived my life like that. I don't reveal who I am or to anybody else that I'm my father's daughter. Now, in the Hmong culture, everybody has dark brown hair or black hair. My dad has red hair. And so everybody said, you did something wrong in your past life and you're being punished. So no one liked him because he had red hair. So my mom always kept it very short, and then he always wore a hat. And I don't understand why she did these, but that's what they did. And we would be moving from one village to the next, and every couple of years we could never stay longer than that. The Hmong people are very, very smart in terms of their hands and anything that they do, and we farm for a living. We're farmers. And actually the word Hmong means free. It's spelled H-M-O-N-G, but it just means free. And that's what the people wanted to do. They just wanted to be free. They wanted to be left alone and, worry about their family and make a living that way. And so that's why they settled from China to the northern part of Laos, up in the mountains. And so their Hmong men are very, very smart in terms of knowing how to get in. Now, the jungles of Laos are very thick, like the Amazon jungles, if you guys ever been there. So if you're not native, you can easily get lost. And so, but our people can hunt, and if they see a plane go down, they can, no compass, on foot, get to that crash site. And if the pilot is still alive, they can rescue that pilot. So my dad had done that all of his life, even before I was born. He was part of the secret war during the Vietnam War. And so they were really good with these jungles. So they were kind of recruited to help take care of the pilots that would go down and rescue them if they were still alive, get them back to health, and then send them on their way. So my dad did that. And those reasons why my mom had asked me to not reveal myself is because when the American soldiers pulled out of Laos, then the communists turned against the Hmong people who had been helping, really not fighting, shooting at anybody, but just rescuing people. And because now we're traitors. When the Americans were there, they were protecting us. But now that they have left, supposedly Laos was to become, peaceful again. And that's why when they pulled out, then they started killing the Hmong people. And we lived in the jungle, sort of, We're not in the city. We go to the city once in a while to trade for other food and things like that. But the majority of the time we make our own food and we live up there. But by the time we heard the news that people down in the city had left to go to Thailand, there was no planes for us. It was too late for us. So then we were left to defend for ourselves, take care of our own family. I had an older sister and an older brother that was living in the city, and my brother was a medical student at the time, and they were able to be put on the plane to leave. I don't know how many planes that was carrying the Hmong people out in 1975 that day, but there was no more room for us we didn't even know about it. When we heard about it, it was already too late. And so our goal was just to stay alive. So in the spring of 1976 is where my story is going to take place. We've been running or kind of hiding. We live in the village, but usually it's getting worse and worse each year or each time. At night, we would go sleep in caves, and then during the day, we would come back, return to our village and prepare and go to our farm. And we had rice fields and corn fields and vegetable fields and things like that. And so my mom would always keep my sister and I at home, but then lately she's starting to just take us with them to the farm. She didn't want to keep us at home anymore. But that early spring morning of 1976, we were running late that day. And so usually we leave at about maybe 6 o'clock in the morning because we want to get as much done in the daylight and at the farm. But we were running late, so I'm thinking maybe it's 9 o'clock by then. And so my mom had asked me to run over to my aunt's house just to borrow some salt so that we can take it with us to the farm so we can have lunch later on. It's probably about maybe just 50 feet away. It's where my aunt lives. There was a gate that kind of separated the two homes. I was walking and I looked up, and standing there at the gate was this man. I can tell that he was badly wounded because there was a hole in his face and he was covered in blood. And back in those days, we believe in ghosts, and so I thought, okay, maybe it's a ghost. You don't see ghosts during the day, but if I just don't look at him and I walk past him, maybe he'll just disappear. But he startled me, I froze, then he looked at me and he spoke to me and he said, "Is there a doctor in the village?" And I said, "No, everybody has left to go to the farm. It's just me left at home," which I lied because my dad is the herbal doctor in our village. And but I couldn't give up my dad, so I said, "Everybody's gone." But then instead of going on to my aunt's house, I ran back home. So he followed me home. He came home. Of course, my dad took him in, took care of him. And there was some whisperings between my dad and him, and then whisperings between my mom and my dad. Then my mom came over to at the time, there's 4 of us at home. My older sister, older brother, myself, and my baby sister. And my mom came and said, "Okay, remember those packs that I packed for each of you? Just pick up that pack and go away from the village, away from where this man came from, and just keep going, keep walking, and I'll catch up to you." And so the 3 of us just said, okay. So we did what we were told, and we started walking away from the village. And usually we've gone away before, but then we will come back a couple of days later when it's safe, I guess. But we kept walking, and it was getting later and later. And my mom did catch up to us, but then we kept walking and walking until it was evening. And my dad and my oldest sister was still not there. I was getting concerned, and so I asked my mom, well, where's Dad and where's my sister? And she said, oh, they'll be coming. You'll be okay. So we kept walking. And it seemed like we walked for a long, long time because it was already dark by now. But my sister and my dad caught up to us, and we finally rest. And my dad explained that the guy that I ran to that morning was one of the soldiers that was guarding the entrance to our village. They were probably about maybe 4 or 5 miles out from our village, and they were attacked the night before. And he was to come warn us and tell us to get out of the village, but he was still shot, and the rest of them were probably killed. We didn't know what happened to them, but he made it, and that's why we had to leave right away.
How old are you at this time?
I was probably 6. We don't have birth records, so I still think that I'm not really 50. Maybe I'm younger than, I like that. So probably about 6. So then my dad said that that's why he walked all this way, even when he was injured, to just tell us, get out now. They'll be here by nightfall. And he was right. So my dad and my sister stayed back in the village to kind of warn the rest of the villagers and say, hey, we need to pack up and just get out of here. And we're used to that because we're always, picking up and just leave. And so we warned as many people as we could. Some of the ones that hadn't come back from the farm, we couldn't let them know. So whoever was left in the village was killed or was tortured to death or was captured and then tortured to death later on. But my dad he had a price on his head, so he couldn't be caught, or his family could not be caught.
Why was there a price on his head?
Because he helped in the secret war. And remember what I said, he can easily be spotted because he had red hair. So they call him the redhead man or guy.
So the soldiers, were they American soldiers or were they?
No, they were not American soldiers. They're Laotian and Vietnamese soldiers. This is the communist soldiers. The Hmong people were little rebels. They didn't want to take part in it. They just wanted to be free, And so, but because they helped when the Americans were there, they just gave a reason for them to say, hey, you were traitors. You helped save these American pilots and these pilots that were not even in our team. So they started to just...
So the man that was injured that your dad helped?
He was Hmong.
He was Hmong.
Yeah. So then they explained more, and my dad said we could never return. Well, by then, though, we can hear the animals in the village. The communist soldiers had already arrived, and they were burning our rice storage. They were killing our animals. Anybody that was left was killed. They burned everything. Seemed like we walked for a long time, but we didn't go very far. We can still see the fire. You can hear the noises. So we knew that we could never go back to the village ever again. So from that point on, we continued traveling up in the mountains of Laos. Again, just trying to stay alive. My mom had a 25-pound bag of rice on her back. My dad had one. My sister probably had a 10-pound. I was carrying all the cooking utensils. My sister, of course, sometimes had to be carried. My brother was also carrying maybe 5 or 10-pound bag of rice. And that's what we had to take care of us until we found refuge. We had heard of this place called the America, and they said it's like heavens. But in order to get there, we had to go from Laos to Thailand, and then from Thailand to the America, which was impossible. There's no way. No one has ever done it. You can fly, but there's no plane, nothing. So our goal was to at least maybe get to Thailand, and there would be a little bit of refuge, freedom. But there was no way to get to Thailand. My dad he's not a warrior. He's not a fighter. He's just one of those, he's a healer. He's the herbal doctor. He has healed many, many sick people, but that's all he can do. He cannot shoot anyone. If it was between someone, shooting him and him shooting them, he'll just die. He'll take a bullet. He's just not like that. So he was scared. And we had about 100 to 150 people. How do you hide that many people? And so we were running, just going up the mountains and trying to stay hidden. And during the day, we would hide in the jungle. At night, my mom would get up and start a little fire and cook, just a pot of rice, and then we'll eat it for the next couple of days. And that's how we lived for the next 2 years. But eventually, 6 months later, now the time frames are a little bit skewed because I was only 6 or 7, but it seemed like it'd been a long time because some people ran out of rice, so they had to surrender. If they surrendered to the communists, we made them promise that they would not give up our position because my dad just couldn't be caught. And so they promised, so we let them go. Some had left our group. My dad is a natural born leader, though, and he wanted to keep his people together. And so a lot of people wanted to follow him. And then we had some that had died of starvation or illness. My dad couldn't save them because he didn't have the medication that he needed. One of the person that died shortly after, maybe about 6 months after we left our village, was my cousin, who was just 2 years younger than me. That was my first scene of death and how devastating it was. Watching her mom just cried over her. We quickly buried her and then we had to leave. And so we continued moving. Eventually the men in the village decided that there was this really tall mountain in Laos. And if we can get to the top part of the mountain, we will be safe because that is where you can get lost if you try to come up if you're not native there. And we will be able to be there at least maybe 6-7 months to be safe. So our goal was just to keep running, keep changing our location so that we would not be caught until we could find a way to get to Thailand. My dad, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Hmong people, and you come from China, so you don't look like the Laotians, right?
That's correct.
And that's how they can tell that you're Hmong, is because
Yes.
you look different. It's not because you're in these villages in the mountains. It's because you look different.
We look different, and yes, a lot of the villages are with different, people as well. There are men and there are other people too, yes, but we do look a little bit different. We have lighter skin.
And that's how they knew you.
Yeah, yes, and also our language is different too. Yes, and so, then they decided that if we go up there, we will be safe for another 6 months or so. But it's getting later and later in the time frame that we've left our village. Eventually, all the rice that we'd brought with us, we ran out. And so we were going maybe sometimes, without eating for a couple of days. And so it was getting harder and harder for the elderly people. My sister was traveling to other villages to try to sneak or steal some rice at night and then coming back to us with a little bit. And as she was doing that, she ran into, the people that surrender can live freely in a way, but not really, because they can be killed anytime as well. But they also tried to save these people that were running, that couldn't surrender. And so my sister was going back into some of the villages that were still lived in and asking for rice and paying for rice. And while she was doing that, she met a guy from Thailand. He and his group traveled back and forth between Laos and Thailand a lot, rescuing some of these people. So my dad, unless there was a sure plan to get to Thailand, he didn't want to leave. Because if anybody that was caught trying to escape was tortured. And you rather they just put a bullet in your head, because the way they torture people is that they tie you to a tree or a rock or something, and they start to cut your legs, and and then they just pour salt in there and just let you sit in the sun to die. So the safe thing, or the kind thing for them to do, is put a bullet through your head. And my dad didn't want that, so that's why we keep running. And so my sister met this guy. He knew of a short plan to get to Thailand. So she said, "We've got money. Can you just take my family? I've also had people in Thailand that we can pay you a lot more." And he said, "No, I can't take your family, but I could take you." And she was 18, being with a group of men at age 18. In our culture, it's just not appropriate. There's no way. And so she was smart. And he was already married, but she said, could I become a second wife to you? Because if she married him, he would treat her better. And so he said, oh yeah, absolutely, of course. And my dad said, no, that is not gonna happen. But she knew that that was the only way to save our family, because we've already been running for a little over a year now, almost 2 years now. And we were running out of options and places to go. And so she agreed to marry him, and he agreed to take her to Thailand. Her goal was when she gets to Thailand, she'll contact our sibling, the brother and sister that came in 1975, because by now they thought we were dead. You know, there's no way we'd survive that long. And so she married him, and they left for Thailand, and my dad was just devastated because she was our source of food. So we couldn't go back and forth with food anymore, so then things became worse. Eventually, we did make it to this mountain, and we stayed there maybe just a month. And then, you know, gunshots, you know, airplanes overhead, bombs going off, machine guns going off. They were attacking. They found out somehow that there was people there, and so they set up guns down at the foot of the mountain, and they flew planes overhead. There was no way we could survive that. And so we lost a lot of people that way. But for that attack, my dad said we're just gonna have to stay there, because if we stay there, they'll come up and they'll just capture us. But he said, just stay here for the night, and then when it gets really dark, we'll have to just go back down the mountain. There's no other way. We can't go up, we have to go back down. But if we go down during the day, we're gonna get caught. So at that point, then we had some people that just decided to surrender, and some people that was killed because of that attack. And then at night, when it was very dark, we just took our family down the mountain, literally everybody just holding hands, and somehow we got past everybody that, the bad people, the communists that was setting up guns down there to try to kill us. And we made it to a different part of the mountain down towards the foot more. And so we continued to, again, just kind of live. My sister, before she left, she told my mom, don't go too far away from this mountain. Stay within here, these radius. When I sent somebody back, I would tell them to come to these areas. And these were areas that my mom and my dad were familiar with. And so my mom was trying to stay in the same place, but we couldn't because we were attacked. And so then we started to just kind of camp around the mountain a little bit, but then it became really, really bad to where food was becoming, we were eating every fourth day, maybe. My parents were just giving us food. We were eating any plants that wasn't poisonous. Wild animals was actually already gone by that time. And so we were getting super hungry all the time. And then we heard about this cave, that big, huge cave that families can live in there and during the day and then just go out at night, try to get water or hunting or whatever it is. And our goal was maybe now go to the cave and see if, you know, we can be there for another couple months until we're buying our time, until maybe we could be rescued. But one thing is, the two siblings that came to Thailand, and they actually made it to the US. So it was even harder for them to get in touch with us. And also by then, it's been 2 years. They knew there was no way we could survive, so they weren't even looking for us anymore. But in camping in some of those little tiny areas, there'll be some mornings that men armed just showed up in our little tent and be talking to my dad, and then my dad said, okay, we need to go now. Every place that we've been at, we have to, you know, extinguish the fire. We have to make sure it looked like no one was there. So once everybody leaves, then everybody has to put leaves on just to make sure that it didn't look like anybody lived there.
What kind of supplies did you have you lived with, like, every day?
Nothing. Maybe we had one blanket for the whole family. Just like I said, the cooking utensils, it was a pot and just some spoons to stir the rice with. And then some of my mom's, well, not even a lot, she had a little bit of her dowry clothing that her mom given her. Those were very important. That's all we had with us. And that's why we can get up and leave at any time. So every time that we need to be in a place, we just put banana leaves and make it, you know, kind of like a tent. And then once we are done, then we just leave it, and we basically cover up the footprints, the fire pits, and everything so that it looked like no one had been there. So maybe like 4 or 5 times that mornings that we're not planning to quite leave that area yet, we'll have somebody that just showed up and say, hey, you guys need to leave this area now. People are coming. And we would say, okay, where did you come from and who are you? And it would be somebody that my dad has saved their grandfather's life some time ago. And then there's be a time where they would say, hey, I know who you are. You need to leave now. We were actually sent here to kill you guys, but because you saved my dad's life, I'm going to give it back to you. And many times like things happen like that. So we were saved that way. But then this trip to so then that's when we decide, okay, we're going to go to this cave. That would be the best place. That would give us a short couple of months, and then we'll go other places. And so to travel to this cave, though, it's going to take probably a good, I don't know, maybe 5, 6, 7 days on foot with a group of people. But we set out to do that. And I just remember that when we were getting kind of close to the cave, we got to the point where the men were saying, okay, the women are slowing us down and the children are slowing us down. So we need to make a decision. And that night, or that day, I became really sick. And I was running a fever, probably so high that I don't know how high, but I just remember that I felt like someone was taking a hammer to my head. But I couldn't, but I had to continue walking. So I walked all day crying. Every time I cried, my mom would say, please just keep it down because you're gonna make it all of us be captured or killed. But my head was hurting so bad and there wasn't anything I can do. And we walked all that day, and then at night that they got together and they talked and they said, okay, listen, we've got to split up and we've got to send all the women to the city and be surrendered, and then just leave the men and the younger boys running. They wouldn't kill the women, is what they said. But my mom said, no, I will not go and surrender, because she knew, she was very smart. She knew that if she surrendered, they would torture her until my dad came forward. And so she said, no, if you don't want us to run with you guys, the men, we will run on our own. So she collected a few of my aunts and my mom, and she said, we will just run on our own. We don't need you guys. And so in the end, yes, my dad said, okay, she is not going. And so a few of my aunts and my grandma, my dad's mom, actually surrender at that point. So when you surrender, you just literally, you put a white flag up and you start walking down towards the village or city, and they won't shoot at you. So my grandpa died when my dad was 10, so he's the oldest in the family, so he'd been taking care of his mom for all that time, and this is the first time that they're going to be separated. So it was really, really hard for my dad to let her go. But she was older and she was slowing everybody else down, so she agreed. She would take my aunt, his sister, and a couple more aunts, you know, on my dad's side, and they would surrender. So they left us that morning. Well, that night, actually, we decided that they're going to leave in the morning. So at that evening, I became more and more sick. My dad, he can tell when someone's going to die because he's been an herbal doctor for so long. And there was nothing he could do for me. Because by that evening, I was having bloody diarrhea and my fever was just so high. So all he could do was hold me. I remember that waking up, you know, sometime during the night, he was dozing off, but he was still holding me. Now, he had 3 babies that died in his arm as well, so I was going to be the 4th. I could see him crying sometimes, but he was trying really hard to, you know, keep himself together. And he was just wanting to hold me so that maybe when I took my last breath, he was still there. So he didn't sleep very much that night, but to his surprise, I woke up in the morning, my fever had broken, and I asked for some water, and he knew that I was out of the woods. So that morning, we let my grandmom and them go to surrender, and we continue on to go to get to this cave. And so in order to get to the cave, we have to cross this old abandoned village. It's probably, to go through the village is probably about a mile out. And my dad, again, he said, you know, this is an old village. There could be landmines, there could be traps. But the men in the village also said, no, we have women and children with us now, so we could go behind the village, but you're going to be climbing some rocks, and it's going to be a little bit more steep. And my dad thought that it would be better if we go behind the village, but he was outvoted. And so we decided, okay, fine, we'll go through the village. But because I've been so sick that night, I couldn't walk very fast. So my mom and I were, so what we had to, there was one path that was probably maybe, I don't know, 10 feet wide, and we had to stay within that path and just go in single files, basically. So we waited until it was very dark at night, and everybody was lined up by their family. My mom and I were the last two of our family because I knew I was going to be very, very slow and didn't want to hold anybody up. So then at night, when it's so dark, we started walking just slowly through this path to get past this village. And we're walking along, maybe, I don't know, seemed like it was just 20 minutes into the walk. The sound of the earth started shaking, and this boom just went off. And I thought, okay, what happened? And then as soon as the bomb went off, then gunshots start going at us. And that was the night that reminds me of all these bullets. Because as soon as the bomb went off, then gunshots just went into the air. Because it was so dark, I can see the bullets because they have tracers on them, flying overhead, to the side, everywhere, just like the 4th of July, the grand finale. If you just look up in the sky, you can see these bullets. And then it was like a stampede. Everybody started turning around because the bomb went off ahead. And so everybody just started turning around, and they were actually stepping on my mom and I because we couldn't get out of the way fast enough. So I told my mom, I said, okay, we need to get off the road because there's no way I can outrun them. So we kind of just jumped off the road into a little ditch. And we watched as the people ran past us in the dark, and then watched all the bullets flying by. And then after a little bit, it seemed like it calmed down. So I told my mom, let's get back up on the road. We'll just start walking. And we got back up. The gunshots were still going. I think it went for about a good 30 minutes. And so, but as we were walking on the path, I remember that the bullets was hitting any bush, anything around us, you know, down to everything. But it was as my mom and I were in a little bubble. Bullets were going overhead, to the side, everywhere, but we were not hit. And I don't know about you guys, but I've never dodged a bullet before, except for in Hollywood, right? And so, we just keep walking in the path, and keep walking back, and we walked back into the end of a path to a banana orchard, a wild banana orchard, where everybody kind of regrouped. At that point, we were just whispering, but saying, okay, your family, how many were in there? Where's everybody? And my mom and I, they thought we were shocked because we were the last ones to show up. But eventually we made it, and there was 2 families missing. It was my dad's brother, and then my other uncle. The whole family was missing, but they were the first family to take off. So we knew something had happened. But my dad said, okay, we can't run anymore. Let's just calm down. Seems like the gunshots had stopped a little bit, so everybody regrouped. As we were sitting there waiting a little bit, we heard voices coming through, and it was my uncle and his family. So it turned out that the first uncle tripped over the landmine, and then he got badly injured on his leg, but the second uncle took the whole blow of it. So that second uncle was killed. His son, my cousin, was shot in the stomach, and then the uncle that tripped over it was injured, so that's why it took them longer to get back to us. We couldn't go back for the uncle that was killed. We just left him there. So they came and told us that story, and then we were so tired that we just was standing up basically, and everybody was kind of falling asleep. We had to stay together because we didn't know what other traps they had set. But boy, it seemed like I just closed my eyes, and my mom basically told my dad, okay, get up, we gotta go. We need to move now. My dad's like, it's still so dark. And she said, no, we gotta go now. And so they started just pinching each other. It's okay, wake up, we gotta go, we gotta go. And so we moved out of the banana orchard there and started walking maybe half a mile away. Then, sunrise. And we could see that right there where we were was so close to the camp, the base camp. They were like, just 50 feet away. And so my mom later on explained why she suddenly just woke up like that, because we were waiting to see if my other uncle, the first uncle that tripped over the landmine, said he was badly hurt. I don't think he made it, but we didn't know. So we waited for him to see if he would make his way. But my mom said why she closed her eyes, he came to her and said, I'm not coming back. You guys need to leave now. It's when he said now that woke her up. And that's why she said, that's why we had to leave right away. So when we were away from the banana orchard and it was sunrise, we can see my uncle that died had a flag on him. And to gloat that they killed someone, they would raise the flag on the person. So they were raising his flag, and so we knew that he had died. And so we continued to go a different way to get to the cave. By the time we got to the cave, it was full. Nobody wanted us there. They said, we can't take any more people, because if more people came in, we're going to all end up killed. But my dad asked them if they could just give us a couple of days for us to mourn my uncle, because we'd just been attacked. He died. So they allowed us to stay there for about 4 days. So after the 4 days, we had to move. So we went back up to the mountain again, to kind of where the area of where my sister said, stay around here. Within even, just a mile, 2 miles away from here. If I would just send someone, I would send them here. But then by word of mouth, we heard that there was a group coming to Thailand, matching my sister's group. All men, one woman. The woman was shot and killed. They were attacked. My dad and my mom were devastated. They knew my sister had been killed. So the hope of her sending someone to rescue us is now gone. So now we're just basically running until we either die of starvation. My dad and my mom rather died of starvation than being shot or being tortured. So we went back up to the mountains, not too far up, but just more towards the foot of the mountain. And by then we were going more than 5 days without a lot of food at all, because we were running out of food. And my mom and my dad heard of this rice field that people had been just kind of stealing at night. But they had to do something, or we will really die of starvation. And so they took my brother, so my mom and my dad, and they took my older brother. So my sister and I were the only two that was left at camp, along with the rest of the villagers. My mom did instruct them, if you guys hear gunshots or anything, please try to help these two kids, because we're not going to be here. The other thing too is if any smoke goes above these thick trees, a plane will come by. As soon as the plane comes by, anybody that wasn't under some kind of tent or anything would just fall over, and they've died, because we didn't know it at the time, but it was poison gas, but it was clear. So there was no way they tried every way they can to kill all of us. And for little kids, sometimes if they know where a village is, they will they put poison in candies and give it to the little kids and kill them that way, And so we had to be so careful. But in this particular area, we only been there a couple of days. But my mom and dad left to go to this rice field to try to steal some rice. And my mom told me, just remember what I told you. And just if you hear gunshots, run. Take your sister and run. I promise I will find you. We've heard horror stories where families been separated, so I was terrified. But we couldn't go with them because my sister and I would just only slow them down. So they left early in the morning, and then by about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they hadn't come back. And I was getting worried. But at that time, 3 men just showed up again, our little tent, armed. And one of them spoke to me by name, called me by name, by the way, and he said, I know who your father is by name as well. Where are they? And I said, I don't know who you're talking about, but it's only my sister and I left. You know, my parents were killed, and we're the only two left. We're running around, you know, with this village, and so that's why we're alone. And he said, don't lie to me. I know where your parents are. I mean, where are they? And I know who they are. We're here to rescue you. But I was just thinking, no, I'm not giving up them, you know, their positions and everything. But so he talked to me for a good 20 minutes. Okay, we know so-and-so. He named everybody that I knew. And he said, listen, your sister sent us to rescue you. Where are your parents? And I heard that my sister had been killed. So I said, okay, that was very smart of you, but that's not going to happen. And I said, I already told you, I am not that person's daughter. And I told you my parents were killed. And you can kill me if you want, but I don't have any other information to give you. And he said, okay, I can see that I can't get through to you, but I see that you have a fire pit. We've been traveling all day. Can we just at least cook? And I said, that's fine. But the whole time they were cooking and talking, I was watching for my parents to return, hoping maybe they won't return quite yet. But I saw my mom start coming towards us. And so I took off running to her and I said, listen, there are these 3 men, they're in our tent, and they're armed, and they're asking for Dad and you. I don't know who they are. And so my mom motioned, we were trying to save my dad's life, motioned for him to just sit down and rest and don't come up. And so she came with me back to the tent and met these men. And turned out that they were legitimate people that were sent to rescue us. But they sent one of my dad's best friend. And so he scolded my mom a little bit and said, I don't know what you gave this child. She did not give any information to us. And he's like, I haven't seen her in a long time, and she looks a little bit different, but she refused to give us anything. She was starting to convince me that I was in the wrong place. And my mom said, well, it's for her own good. So once we found out that it was them, my dad came and he said, listen, your daughter did make it to Thailand. Your 2 other kids are in America. They paid a lot of money for us to come and rescue you. And so my sister was very smart because she knew that if she sent a stranger, my dad would not go with them. So they sent one of his best friends. And he said, but there's 4 of us. And my dad said, okay, but there's only 3 of you here. And he said, we had a plan. We had it mapped out. It was going to take us 10 days to get to the Mekong River. And we were going to have boats there to cross us from Laos to Thailand. But something happened. Along the way, we were attacked. And the guy that had all the map and the compass and everything else was killed. Now they know that we're going to be coming back, so they'll be waiting for us. So he said, okay, so we have to go a different route, which I don't know because it hasn't been mapped out, so it's going to take us longer. So it would take us 10 days on foot to get to the Mekong River. The Mekong River is what separates Laos from Thailand. And they would have boats there in 10 days to wait for us to cross. But we didn't make it there in 10 days because we had to deviate from the route. So it took us 15 days. But along the way, my mom and dad got some food that day, some rice. So we had enough to maybe get us through for the next 7 days or so. So we had to be very, very careful with that because on this trip, now we have an agenda. We can't just be lingering around. So we had to be careful with our food, and then we had to also go fast. But my dad, to leave, when running in the jungle was okay, knowing that my grandma was somewhere in the village, just not with him, but leaving her behind in a different country was not a thing that he wanted to do, but he didn't have a choice. There was no way to get in touch with her. And so we started traveling along, and one of the uncle on my mom's side was with us, and maybe 7 days into this trip, he became really sick. And when you're sick, they just want to drink hot water. You can't really drink cold water. There's a lot of spring waters, but so that's how we were drinking. But he said, I've got to have some hot water. And there was no way to boil the hot water because we can't start a fire. We had to keep going. And so he said, listen, I'm going to go off from you guys, and I'm going to go try to find a farmhouse or something along the way and just get some hot water. We made him swear on his life that he cannot tell, anybody. If he was caught, he had to lie. So he said, okay, I promise. So he goes to this farmhouse that is probably maybe now half a mile from our route. And in the farmhouse, he can see that they're there because there was, smoke. And so he asked if he can just get some water. And they were very suspicious of him as well because they didn't want to be killed or attacked either. Back in those days, you just don't know who you can trust. And so as they were boiling some water for him, it was my grandma and my aunt in that house, by the way. My grandma hadn't seen him for a couple of years. And so, but my grandma kept looking at him and saying, okay, I know you. How do I know you? And he said, oh, you don't know me. I went hunting and I was lost. And I saw that you guys were here, so I came to get some water. And she said, no, there's something about you. And she said, let's just talk for a little bit. I left my son and his family, maybe a couple of months ago, and I haven't heard anything. Have you heard if they're still alive? What's going on? And he said, no clue who you're talking about. I don't know, where they are. And I'm sorry, I just need to get my water and then I'll be out of here. And she kept going at him, please, just tell me if they're alive. And so he just said, okay. And he knew her too, but he didn't want to say anything. So he just whispered to her, actually, I was with your son's group. We are going to Thailand. You will never see him again. He is gone. And I just left that group. And so I don't even know if I could find them. And she said, do you think you can get back up to where they are? And he said, I could, but we might be a half a day's walk. And she said, then I'm going with you. And then she explained to my aunt. So when you surrender like that, every time you go to the farm and you come back home that night, they try to count how many people went with you, how many people came back with you. So my grandma said, when you get back to the village, they're going to wonder where I'm at. You need to tell them that I'm sleeping in the farmhouse today and I'm not coming back. And she said, stall them for a couple of days. And then by then we would have gone to where we need to be. So he brought her, and about, I don't know, it was dark at night when they came back to us again. And my dad was just surprised. Mom, what are you doing with him? And how did you find her? And so he told the whole story. And so we seen the reunion of my dad. My dad only cried a few times, and I happened to be there at each of the time that he's cried, because being men, you shouldn't be crying. You should be tough. But my dad was soft-hearted like that. So he was so happy. Now his heart is whole, and he can leave the country. But again, my grandma was slowing us down because she's older. And so we started traveling again, and like I said, we didn't get there until it was 15 days later. There was no boats. Boats were gone. So the guy that came to rescue us had a plan. None of us were swimmers. The Mekong River is about the size of the Mississippi River, is what I was told. And so we had to get across that somehow. But he was a swimmer. So he said, listen, if you guys could just float, you could tie yourself to me, I'll swim, then we'll get you across. He was paid a lot of money. Even though he was my dad's friend, he was paid a lot of money, so he was determined to get us there. So bamboos are hollow. There's lots and lots of bamboos. So he said, okay, we'll cut down bamboos and tie them into little bundles. The kids would get smaller bundles, the adults would get bigger bundles. We'll put them under your armpits so that you will float. Tie yourself to me, I will swim, you guys just basically glide along. Great plan. Okay, we're good. So, but we couldn't cross during the day. We had to cross at night. So then during the day, we tried to prepare and make as little noise as possible. So we prepared, each family prepared their own little bundles. He had the same plan for everybody else that was going to cross, but they do this with their own family. And he was only responsible for our family. So we did that, and then it was probably about midnight when we had to cross. And so we got everything ready, everything was tied. We went to the water, and it was cold. So then I heard a baby crying. As soon as the baby cried, lights went on, gunshots all over again. And I was just thinking to myself, don't look back. If you don't hear, don't feel anymore, that means you've been shot. So we just glided along peacefully. We lost some more people there. Some people were captured and tortured to death. My family was okay. He just continued swimming. He said, don't panic, we'll just keep going until someone gets shot. But my family, no one was shot. We were okay. So he swam for a good, it seemed like a long time because I was getting tired and I was swallowing a lot of water. My dad had to keep his hand on my chin the whole time. And so, but then our foot touched sand. And so everybody was like, yeah, okay, we're good, we're there. But the guy that was, helping us to get across said, okay, just, you guys, the Lee family, hold on to your bamboos for a little bit because sometimes the river splits into two. So just hang on. But we've been in the water for so long that when we got up, it was so hard to walk and it was so hard for us to carry our bamboo bundles. But he said, just hang on for a little bit, okay? And if this is land, then you can let it go. Well, we walk about maybe, 50, 100 foot over, there was another part of the ocean or river. So a lot of them they didn't know about this, so they got all excited, so they let the bamboo bundles go. And they're like, yay, this is good, we're in Thailand. And so they were stranded in this little island there. But our family got back in the water and we started swimming again. But by now we're so tired, it's been a couple of hours. And so then I was dozing off again in the water. And suddenly I can hear my dad talking to his best friend. And his best friend is saying, listen, we're stuck in a whirlpool or something. We're not going anywhere. And I won't die with you guys, so I'm going to have to cut you loose. And my dad's like, oh, come on. Keep swimming. We can help you in any way that we can. We can kick, we could do. And he said, no, I'm tired. I've got to cut you loose. And my dad pleaded for our life. And he said, no, I can't. I won't die. I won't die with you guys. And my dad is not religious. And at that point, I heard him say a prayer. And he said, God, if you are there, and if you exist, can you please, we have come this far. I don't want to die in the water. Just help my family to get to Thailand. And then within seconds after his prayer, his friend said, okay, we're okay. We're moving again. So he started swimming again, and eventually we touched sand again, and we stood up, and there were soldiers with guns again. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're gonna die. But they start, but the whirlpool, we didn't know if we'd been turned around or we were on the Thailand side, and there was guns pointing at us. And so they started, usually they try not to speak, because if you speak, just like your question, if you speak, they know who you are. And so we try not to say anything, but they start speaking, and they were speaking Thai. My dad spoke 7 languages, and Thai was one of them. So he spoke up and he said, please don't kill us. We've been running to get here just for some refuge. We don't have any weapons. There's no way we can harm you. And they knew of a lot of Hmong people, escaping to Thailand. Once you get to Thailand, then you stay, and they're kind of like a camp. And so they didn't kill us. They didn't know what we were there for, but my dad pleaded with them and said, listen, this group of people that is with me, we've been trying to get here, and we just are now finally here. Don't kill us. And so they didn't kill us. We were processed in Thailand. I call it processing because we don't have any rights to be in Thailand, but we wanted to just be there for refuge. So we stayed there for about 6-7 months, and then that's when we learned more about this place, the America. Again, we heard about it again, and my brother was there, and my brother could potentially get us there. But the paperwork is very, very long process. We had to go through interviews. We had to be checked to make sure that we didn't have any kind of disease. And it took a good maybe 3 or 4 months. And if you fail any of these, then you can't go to America. And plus, we had to have a sponsor, preferably a native, a U.S. sponsor rather than anybody else. And so my brother did all the forms and things to try to rescue us from Thailand, but we needed a Caucasian family to sponsor us, and he had to look for that. So eventually he found one, but Thailand wasn't as good either because we were in this camp where they put fenced around this area for all the Hmong people to live, and anybody that stepped out of that fence was shot and killed, no questions asked. And so my dad knew there's no way we could live here either. So that's why we wanted to come to America. And eventually, after about 4 or 5 months, we were processed and we were able to come to the U.S. In January of 1980, we made it to the U.S. And it was, my dad stepped off the plane and he looked over at my mom and he had this big, huge smile on his face. And my mom was kind of confused. We didn't even understand what they were speaking, but he said, "I'm home." I'm like, "What?" And he said, "Look at the different hair colors. I fit in. I'm here." So he was so happy to be here in America. And he was so happy. He wanted to learn the language. He wanted to learn how to read and write. And he wanted to do all these wonderful things here because he was free. Well, a bad thing happened in 1982 in November. I heard a kick to our door. All I can hear was my mom say, "Get down here, something's wrong with your dad." They were sleeping in the basement. We go down there and he's not breathing. He was fine the night before. We had a great dinner, we talked. He had just found a job. He wasn't breathing. So we called 911, the ambulance came. They were supposed to cure him. I mean, this is America. Doctors can cure anybody, right? They said, no, he suffered a heart attack. There's nothing we can do to save him. When we were here, and while he was alive, he wanted to join a church. He wanted to now be religious. He remembered his prayer. He remembered that God saved him. So we started looking, and so we started to go to a Methodist church. And it was a mile away, and we didn't have a car, but we walked every Sunday to go to church. He loved the church. So when he died, I asked the pastor, "Why do people die?" I was 10. And he said, "Well, God takes them when he needs them." And I said, "Wait, but we need my dad. He is the only person that's working. Why would a kind God, take a father from a family?" And he couldn't explain that to me. He just said, "Well, God takes them whenever he wants to." And I said, "No, that's not a fair God." So I vowed that day on that I would not go to church again. I would not step foot in a church. I would not worship a God that would take away my father, because we started suffering again. We didn't have any money. We were living in this place that we couldn't afford. So I was really upset. And then it would be 7 years later, we really were put into a government project home because I couldn't work, my mom couldn't work, so we put us, we lived with my brother who brought us here and his wife, but our family was getting bigger because they had kids too. So he said that we have to separate the two families. So it would be my mom, my other older brother, my sister, me, and my grandma that had to live somewhere else, and he and his family had to live somewhere else, and we couldn't be in the same home. So they went and bought a home. We were put into this place that there's so much drug dealing going on. There's so much gunshots going on again. We can't even be outside at 6 o'clock at night because you can get shot in the crossfire between these drug dealers. And so I was just terrified. And I remember how we got to the U.S. And I thought, wait, we're going to be killed again? And so at this point, I started to question, well, does God exist? I mean, again, he took away my dad. Now he's not even caring for us. Maybe he doesn't exist. Maybe he doesn't care about us if he exists. And we heard about the Mormon missionaries, by the way, back east.
What state are you in?
Virginia. Yes. But my older brother, even though he wasn't living with us, he said, be aware of these Mormon missionaries. They are like the devils. If you look them in the eye, they've got you. They take 10% of your money, whether you have it or not. So I'm terrified. I'm just like, oh my gosh. But they were everywhere. And this little area where we were living, it was so scary to everybody else, and including us, because there was so much bad things going on. But they were everywhere. And I'm just like, these guys are going to get killed. And they're not street smart. We're very street smart, but they're not. But they kept coming around. And so we live in our apartment building. We live on the 5th floor, and that was the safest one. The stairs going up and down are very narrow, maybe, I don't know, this wide. And so my grandma, once she gets up, she couldn't come back down. 5 flights of stairs. When she gets down, it's going to take her 30 minutes to get back up. So my mom and her don't get up and down very often. My sister and I do because we have to go to school. But so every time there's a knock on the door, it's usually the police looking for someone, or someone's trying to hide from the police. And so on our door, there's a lock, there's 2 deadbolts, and 3 chains. Okay, we had to keep it that way. And so, but these Mormon missionaries, they kept coming to knock on the door every night, no fail. So finally, and every time there's a knock on the door, then we panic. We just were like, okay, hide, we're scared. And so finally I just said, okay, that's it. Through the peephole, it was them again. And I said, okay, open the door except for the chains. I said, listen, you guys, I know about your church. I know it's not true. You guys are wasting your time. This is me being this, 17-year-old that think I could do everything. Just go away. Every time you knock on the door, it scares my family to death, literally, because we don't know who's knocking. And one of the elders said, well, you've heard of our church? And I said, oh, yes, the Mormon church is very popular here. And he said, and you know it's not true? And I said, absolutely, I know it's not true. And so he said, okay. And he said, could you do me a favor? I don't know what possessed him to do that, but he said, can you just pray to God to make sure that our church isn't true? If it's not true, we will go away and never bother you again. And I thought, okay, for months they've been doing this, anything to get rid of them, right? So I'm like, okay, good, done. I can do that. And he said, can we come back in a couple of weeks or so just to check on you to see what the answer is? And I said, okay, fine, do it. Anything to get rid of them. I started praying on my own as well, because I was also seeking, but praying that to let me know if there is a true church, because now there's a Methodist, there's a Baptist, and there's a Mormon church, and is there a true church on the earth? Nothing happened. But then the missionaries did stop coming, by the way. He kept his word. No more knocks on the door. But 3 weeks later, and I had a dream in the morning that our apartment building was burning, and the fire started from the 1st floor. And I can hear sirens, and I could see smoke and flames, and I knew we were going to die, and I was not going to leave my family. So I was thinking in the dream still, wait, before I die, I want to know, is there a true church on this face of the earth? I mean, come on, there's so many of them. And so in the dream, the voice told me to call the person on the 1st floor. And so I remember calling and just telling her, okay, I know we're going to die. I'm not leaving my grandma, but do you know if there's a church on this earth that is true? And the voice on the other end came clear as day. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Never heard of that church before. So my alarm went off. So I wrote it down because it was such a long name, and I've never heard of it. So then a couple of days later, these 2 same missionaries came back, and I was like, I got you. So my mom and my grandma was home, and so I said, hey, come in. They're like, what? And I said, just come on in, have some water because it's hot. And the one that challenged me said, okay, there's something different about you. Why are you letting us in? And I said, oh, just come sit down. We need to have a conversation. And so while we were sitting down, then he said, okay, did something happen? I mean, why are you letting us come here? And I said, I wanted to let you know in advance, thank you for your concern. But as I was telling you, the Mormon church is not true. You're wasting your time. And he said, okay, so what happened? And I said, I had a dream. So I explained the dream. And he said, so do you know the name of this true church of yours? And I said, it was given to me, but I've never heard of it before because it's not the Catholics, not the Baptists. I've heard of all the other churches, but I haven't heard of this one. And he said, do you want to share it with us? And I said, it's really long, so I wrote it down. So I pulled out my piece of paper, and I read it to him, and we can hear a pin drop in the room. And then he started to get emotional. And then I started to feel bad. I was like, oh my gosh, I did not mean anything I said before. I'm so sorry. Your church is not true, but you don't have to cry about this, you know? And so then I started to feel bad. And so he goes into his backpack, pulls out this little black book, and he opens it up. And he said, do you know that that is the formal name of our church? And I was still thinking, man, this guy, he would go at any length. But when he flipped the book open, the name of the church, as I seen it in the dream as well, when it was said to me, was written in this book that I've never seen before. And I said, why did you guys call yourselves the Mormons? And he said, we didn't call ourselves the Mormons. You guys back east call us the Mormons. We're not Mormons. You know, this is the name of our church. So then he started to explain a little more about their church. And I said, okay, sold. I want to be baptized like right now. And he said, no, that's not how it works. We have to teach you all these lessons, and then someone has to come and interview you, make sure that we didn't coach you into, you know, joining our church. And I said, it's completely different from what I've been hearing. And he said, oh, a lot of people have different things about us, and they say different things about us. But in this apartment, whenever the missionaries come and we let them inside the house, all my troubles seem to have melted away. I was 17. I was working a job. I paid me the rent. I had to take care of my family, and I had a lot on my plate. And so, but when they were there, it seemed like everything was okay. It was going to go away. Things were going to be okay. But when they leave, all my troubles came back, and the apartment was dark again. And so eventually I asked them, I said, what is this that you guys bring with you? And he said, we have the Spirit with us. And I said, I want that. And he said, you can get that. So we decided to get baptized, but I was 17. I needed my brother's permission. And he said, no. We already had the date set and everything. And he said, no, that's not going to happen. You deliberately disobey an order that I gave you. I told you not to involve yourself with these people, and you went completely the opposite direction. And we're supposed to be really obedient, and it's a good thing because he protects us, you know. But he said, no, this is not happening. I will not sign. I will not give you any permission for anything. Devastation. Finally, the mission president told the missionaries, okay, they're not going to join the church. You guys need to let them go. Forget it. Baptism date was canceled. Life went back into a dark place again. Several months later, the same sister that sacrificed herself to come to Thailand to save us now have made her way to the U.S. We went to the U.S. before she did. She came to the U.S. and she lived with us, and now she has 4 kids. And then the missionary started teaching her. I was the interpreter. And even just halfway through the lesson, she said, I believe it. I know it's true. I want to be baptized. She's old enough to sign for me to be baptized. So my older sister, my younger sister, and I was baptized in 1988. That's how we come to join the church. Later on, when I came to BYU, I met up with some of the old missionaries that, baptized us, and they said, mission president told us we couldn't come around to, talk to you guys anymore, but there was something about you guys that we just couldn't give up. And even though we would transfer, we were telling the missionaries that come in and say, hey, please just check on the Lee girls. I mean, there's something about them. We don't know what it is, but there's something about them. They said that when we cancel our baptism date, there was the whole mission. Anybody that had come in contact with us did a 24-hour fast. Sister missionaries, war members, missionaries. And then a miracle came. So that's how I joined the church. I started to.
Join?
She did. Eventually, she did. My brother never knew. If you're airing this, you'll probably find out. When I met my husband and we were going to get married in the temple, he said, don't you guys have to join the church in order to marry in their temple? And I said, oh, you're behind on that. So, but so after we were married, came to BYU, and they asked me to translate for General Conference.
To do what?
Translate for General Conference. Because the Hmong language is a very hard language to learn. Not a lot of people can learn it. And the Hmong people are very hard-headed a lot of the time. If you don't speak to them in their language, they don't even want to talk to you pretty much, you know. But these Mormon missionaries, 18, 19, can go to the MTC and learn to speak broken Hmong, you know. So they're like, yeah, we'll listen to you. So they started to have the General Conference translated into Hmong. That was one of the last language, I think, because it was a very small language. They didn't do a lot. But I started translating for that twice a year. I started doing that. And then I started to kind of wonder, why was I saved? There was no way that I could have come to this country without, you know, another hand, not a human hand, literally taking us out of the water, protecting us from being shot at. Why? Why was I here and then some of my cousins died? Why? And then it came to me. He needed you for something else here. And I thought, what? I'm this farm girl out of Laos. What can I do? Until I went to one of the areas in Sacramento where my husband served and met some of the war members there. And a lot of them said, we know you. I'm like, no, you don't know me. I don't know you. We don't know each other. And then the older ladies would say, wait, if I close my eyes and if you keep talking, you are the voice of Sister Okasaki. You're the voice of Sister Julie Beck. You're that voice. And I could just feel like someone is listening. I am making a difference. And then the Book of Mormon needed to be translated into Hmong. I took part in that. Took part in translating the hymns into Hmong, and now the work is still going. So now I don't question anymore why I was saved. Someone like me, and I was just released as the Relief Society president 2 weeks ago. It was not in my mind. When I was called, I told Bishop, do you know who I am? And he was like, yeah. And I said, I'm a convert. I don't know the first thing about being a Relief Society president. You can't be serious. And he said, and I said, I work a full-time job. Relief Society presidents are supposed to be the first ones at the scene of anything. I can't do that. And he said, I didn't call you. The Lord did. 3 years. I served diligently, and it has been a great blessing for me as well. So that's my life story.
What language did you read the Book of Mormon in then? Did you read it?
English.
Okay.
English, yeah.
Because you learned English when you were young.
Yes.
Kids adapt really well.
They do. Yes.
We used to live in Sacramento, and back in the 70s, there was this huge flood of people from the
Yep.
war.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw some of the Hmong handwork.
Yes.
It was amazing, beautiful.
Yes.
You know, as soon as I heard Hmong, that's what I was thinking of when I hear Hmong. I see these women with smiles
Yeah.
that make this beautiful handwork.
Yep, my mom still does that in her 90, she's 93.
What is it? Embroidery?
Embroidery.
Needlepoint?
Like tapestry, embroidery. So my mom makes all of our traditional clothes.
Your mom's still alive?
She is. She lives with us now.
Where do you live?
I live here in American Fork. Here in the U.S. in American Fork. Yes.
Did your grandmother live long enough to hear about the gospel?
Yes, because when we joined, she was still here, but she never joined the church. But she went to church with us often. But as soon as she passed away, I did the work for her and my dad. My husband was proxy for my dad, and we are sealed as a family now. So, yeah, for my grandfather too.
Is the Hmong language, is it based off of Chinese or Thai, or is?
Nope.
What does it
It is
sound like?
its own language. If you guys would like me, I could bear my testimony in Hmong.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and that's why it's so hard to learn. And it wasn't a written language for a long time, and so no one could learn it because they wanted to keep it that way. But okay, so. Cú rong xía hay tiệt cú tao tôn chỉ nên nó nọ thia cú sa khe đồ này bỏ hay tiệt và chữ mua cho xía nhỏ thia nó yêu ít tu năng rong hàng lúc xía rong hàng cú sa khe đồ này hay tiệt lúc có Giêsu cái tao lúc còn sống và trong hai năng trang nhưng mua trang tia cú rong xía hàng cú tao tôn nhỏ cho họ nói thì cú rong xía hàng và chữ bỏ cú họ tới chấm lo tua cho tới chờ nó tuần đó này nhỏ rong xía cái họ tôn chỉ nên nó nọ cú rong xía ở hai tia mua và chữ thia mua nơi lanh tu ở lúc bây giờ đó cú hai linh nó lon that Giêsu Kitô luôn bề amen. So thank you.
I'm glad to see you didn't lose it because sometimes kids come over from other countries. My cousins came from Holland and they lost their language because they didn't speak it in the home once they got here.
Yeah.
They wanted to be Americanized, so.
When we wanted that too because again remember we were farmers, so being here a lot of the girls in Laos didn't get an opportunity to go to school. I mean, we were up in the mountains, so that going to school would go to the cities, you know, and so we'd send a lot of the boys to school, but a lot of the girls did not go to school. So here, we wanted to learn, and so we were just trying to get in, and my mom was actually one of the ones, don't speak Hmong at home, speak English, so that you can learn it, you know. But my dad said, no, they need both. And so my mom, you know, continued to speak to us in Hmong, and that's why my first job was an over-the-phone interpreter for 22 years.
So you did not go to school till you were 8 years old?
10-ish, yeah. I had a lot of health issues. I was telling Debbie that on the way here. I had an ear infection in my right ear since I was a baby and didn't know anything about it until we came here, and they started doing more, you know, exams, and they say, okay, there's an infection. So I lost my hearing in the right ear, and then I had really bad scoliosis. So I had to have surgery and have rods in my spine. So they had to do all of these before I even go to school. So I was about 10. And I started in 3rd grade and stayed in 3rd grade for 3 years.
Did you speak English by the time you got into school?
No.
So you went cold turkey and had to learn
Absolutely.
English?
Yes, actually one of my experiences at school was I walked in, and the teacher handed me a pencil, and guess what else she handed me? A piece of candy. I bawled my little eyes out. I was like, no, I don't want it. And I cried and cried, and she didn't understand why. And so she had to call my brother and ask my brother to come down to the school because she had done something to me. And he came and he said, why are you crying? I said, she's trying to kill me. I know she's trying to kill me. And he said, she's not trying to do that. She's just trying to give you a gift. And I said, no, you don't understand. The piece of candy is poisonous. And he said, no, it's not. So I didn't trust for a long time. And the first couple of 4th of July, I would just curl up in a ball under the bed and just cried because I didn't like the sound of it.
And it still does that to you today.
It does. Gunshots and anything, you know, firecrackers or anything like that just goes up, still scares me.
PTSD.
Yeah.
So did you said when you were running with your family that you had money. So you just took this money and when it was gone.
It was silver bars, actually. My dad was very rich, and we carry those silver bars. I still have the scars to prove it on my back. Yes, we just spent them as much as we could. We tried to get some to Thailand, but see, because when we were swimming, it was heavy. That was weighing us down, so we had to take it off and let it go down, you know. So money was gone that way. Yeah.
Can't eat money though. So.
No,
Nope.
How many children do you have?
I
And do
have
they speak Hmong?
I have 3. The oldest one does, because she grew up with my mom. My mom took care of her a lot, and so she can still speak Hmong. But the other 2, no. My son actually, he was able to speak both languages at the age of 5. Then he said, "Mom, it's getting confusing, so I'm going to stop." I'm like, "Well, which language are you going to speak?" And he said, "I'm just going to speak English." And then he got called on his mission to Minnesota, English speaking, but he worked with a lot of Hmong, and wrote back and said, "Mom, I regretted that ever since I did that." Because I don't know what they're saying.
You should just tell them really quickly about, she wasn't ever supposed to have children.
Oh, yes.
Quickly, that's-
Okay, so how are we doing on time? Okay. So at the age of 13, we go to gym class and they check our back for, I didn't know what it was, but they checked for scoliosis. And of course, I was picked. And mine was really, really bad. It was, usually it's either the upper or the lower back curve. I had it throughout, basically. And my hair was really long back then, so no one could even tell that I was, hunched over or anything like that. We knew that one of my shoulders was shorter than the other, but it was because maybe it was the way I was carrying my purse is what we attribute it to. But when we found out, I was about 13. And they said, normally when we tried to look for it at this stage so that we can correct it with a brace, but they said, yours is really, really bad. There's no way to correct that with brace. We have to have surgery. And so I was like, okay, so if I don't have surgery, then what happens? And they said, if you don't have surgery, then by about 30, you would die. Because by then, it would have curved so much that it would have hovered over your heart, and it would be hard for your heart to do its job. And so but doing for the surgeries, they have to give you all the details of it and tell you all the, maybe side effects of it. And I was translating for my mom at age 13 about this surgery, and they said, if you have the surgery, it's like an 8-hour long. You have to be under for 8 hours, because basically what they're doing is cutting me open from the back, going to my spine, put rods in there, tie it back up, sew me back up. And they said it's very, very complex and complicated surgery. One, you can die during surgery. 2, if you survive the surgery, you may never have children, because it would be too hard for your body to, have kids. It'll automatically abort. And so, but I told my mom, I said, I think I'm going to have the surgery, and because if I die during surgery, I don't have a family yet. I don't want to be 30 and maybe have kids and then die. And so my surgery was set for the early morning, so my mom and I had to, so I was 13, so we hadn't heard much about the church at all. I mean, we knew about them, but we were not interested in joining. I was washing my hair to braid it so that it would be out of the way for surgery. And in the hospital that night, 2 young men came into my hospital room. No one knew that my mom and I were in the hospital. It was just me and my mom and the sponsor that sponsored us, and we were there, and she was helping to wash my hair. But we didn't have like a neighborhood or anything. We didn't know our neighbors. So these young guys just came in, and they called me by name, and they said, hey, we heard that you're going to have surgery. Is it okay with you if we give you a blessing of comfort? And I said, sure, but I thought the doctor sent them in because he knew I was going to die, And so I thought, oh, great, it's okay, it's all right. So I said my goodbyes to my mom and everything, before the surgery and all that. But they gave me a blessing. All I remember is that they put something on my head, and they said, this is blessing for the sick, and we're just going to give you a blessing. They gave me a blessing. I just remember before the surgery, if I succeeded in the surgery, successful, I would stay in the hospital for a whole month, on my back, come home in a wheelchair, and be home taught for about 6 months to a year, and then be in the body brace basically from here down to my hip for about a year, is what they said. That's how long it's going to take. And then, of course, physical therapy and everything else. And so I already knew that whole year and a half of my life is going to be gone. And so when in the blessing, though, these young men said that everything was going to heal okay, and I was going to be fine, which I told them, you don't know what you're talking about because you're not doctors. Yeah. But then the next morning I went and had the surgery and never saw these two young men again though. But my mom said that during my surgery, they came back to her and they said, she's going to be okay. Because she was crying. She was worried about me. And they said, she's going to be okay. Don't worry. And then right after they left the room again, she got a call from a Lao interpreter, because they didn't have a Hmong interpreter at the time, telling my mom her surgery is more than halfway over. She's doing okay. Don't worry. But then after the surgery, we were going home after 5 days of being in the hospital, 5 days on crutches. And as I was, hobbling along to go home, I thanked the doctor. And I said, thank you so much for sending those two young men in. Maybe whatever they did has something to do with it. And he said, I didn't send anybody to your room. And I said, no, it had to be you, because no one else knew that I was going to have surgery. And he said, I didn't tell anybody. So I came home on crutches. I was home taught maybe for about a month. I was back in school on my feet. Within 6 months, my brace came off. I was telling Debbie that a lot of suitors kind of gave up on me because I told them there's a potential I can never have kids. And in our culture, it's good to have posterity, right? And so a lot of them would just say, if you can't have kids, no marriage. But, when I met my husband, I told him the same thing. I have this standard line that I tell everybody about, caution, But he's like, I don't care, So when I had my oldest, she's now 27, 28. My surgeon was still alive in Virginia, and my sponsor as well. And she said, no, you can't do this. Your body's going to abort, or you're going to have to be bedridden. I worked until the day before I had her. I was fine. And then I had my second one. My back was hurting a little bit, but it wasn't too bad, But they were telling me, you gotta get your tubes tied because you can't be having kids. Second one was fine too, but then after the second one, everybody, including my mom, just said, okay, you can't. This got to stop. Your body is not going to handle this very well. But I went and saw a doctor at the U, and I said, if we wanted to have more kids. He said, we do things differently now, but he said the doctor that did your back, he did the very best. It was like top of the line of what he could do. And so it's good, it's healing good. And he said it's almost like you don't have those rods there, so if you want more kids, you can have more kids. And I felt like we were done, but then we have a 12-year-old little caboose. Because when my son was 5, I had a dream about this little daughter of mine, and she was just kind of knocking on the window. I said, Mom, you guys forgot me. And I'm like, what? I remember talking to her through the window saying, my daughter is sleeping in her room. Who are you? And she said, Mom, you guys forgot me. You got to let me in. And so I told my husband about that, and, he said, oh, it's just dreams. It's okay. But then, 8 years later, she came along. So all my kids are miracle kids. I was not even supposed to have them.
Any redheads?
My son is not, but both of my daughters have really light hair, and they do have red tints in their hair because of my dad. Yeah, so.
See that and think of your dad.
Yes.
What lineage are you? What's your patriarchal blessing?
Oh gosh, is it Manasseh? I can't remember. I think it is Manasseh.
Really?
Yeah. Any other questions for me?
Did your husband serve his mission Hmong speaking?
Yes, he did. When he got his mission called, he's back east. So he got his mission called. He told his dad, Dad, I think they misspelled the language here. I've never heard of it either. He did that too. And his dad said, no, they're the mountain people of Laos. This is what they're called. So he served and this is another miracle on its own. He served in Sacramento, and then there was a Hmong missionary that still lives in Sacramento, that came out to D.C., where I live, and he actually baptized me. He taught us there. And then when he went home, my husband was going on splits with him, and he was going to go home to Virginia. And my husband was just saying, I don't want to go home. I love the people. I want to be here. And he said, actually, There is one Hmong family in the DC area. Here's their number. If you ever feel like you need to talk or something like that, I'm sure they'll talk to you. 3 days after he got home, he called us. When he called, my sister was on the phone with him. I had people in my house we were in the middle of negotiating my price for getting married, actually. This Hmong guy had, wanted to marry me, so we were trying to negotiate. And, I was telling him that at the time I was already accepted to BYU, though. And I told him, I said, if you really like me, give me a semester at BYU, and then I'll come back and we can rethink this. And he's like, no, you cannot go out that far to school. And I'm like, no. But I can hear my sister in the background while we were arguing saying, you're Hmong and you live in Virginia? How come? We know all the Hmong people here. And but then he was very polite. He asked to talk to my dad, and so we knew he wasn't from the area. And he asked to talk to my dad, and she said my dad passed away, and so asked to talk to my mom. My sister argued with him for a little bit on the phone, and then my mom got on the phone and kind of looked over at my sister and said, he's white. What are you talking about? He can speak Hmong, but he's Caucasian. And so my sister was like, oh, he sounded Hmong on the phone. But he called that night while I was trying to negotiate my bride price. And while the priest in our little branch, we were very close because our parents didn't go to church. So it was just mostly the kids because we wanted to learn more about the gospel. And so they are terrified of my other brother because he just says, no guys in the house, right? And so never been into our apartment. That night, my mom, my Caucasian mom, who was my young women leader, also taught us a lot of stuff. I was coming out to BYU to room with her daughter. And I just called her and said, I'm not going anymore. I'm going to get married. And 40 minutes later, she's like at my door. What are you talking about? What is this? And I said, I don't know. My mom said I should get married and I shouldn't go to school. And so then she called the priest and, quorum and just said, hey, go say goodbye to Shoua. She's not going to BYU. She's going to get married with this guy that she hardly knows. Everybody disagreed, but I knew that I had to get married. In our culture, 16 is a prime age. I was 19. That's old. That's old. 19 going on 20, so I was getting old. And so people were pressuring, saying, hey, you need to get married. And so then these guys, there were like 6 of them, showed up at my door, and they're like terrified of my brother, of course, saying, what is this? You're not going to BYU? So commotions in the house. My sister talking to this guy that claims he's Hmong. These priest corns showed up. I'm trying to talk to this guy about why we don't need to get married right this minute, because if I agree, I will walk away with him that night. And then the wedding would be later. That's how the marriage is. And so I just keep talking to him, and I'm just like, no, just wait on this. And then these guys showed up, and he said, my Caucasian mom actually talked to me before, and she said, you don't even know this guy. I hope that he shows some kind of characteristics that would tell you the real him. And I said, no, he's perfect in every way. He's Hmong, but he's not a member. And I said, I could convert him. And so the only thing that she left with me that night, because she couldn't convince me not to marry him, was, I hope that he shows his true self, because you really don't know who he is. So when my brothers, from the church came into the home, I knew he was going to be upset. And so I told him, I said, listen, guys, you can't be in here. Go. Just go. And they're like, can we just come in and talk to you for a minute? And I said, no, there's no talking me out of this. But they came in anyways, and then that's when he turned to me and he said, I know you dated every single one of them, didn't you? That's why they're here. And I was like, no, that is not even close to the truth. I said, they're like my brothers. We support each other in this church, and we love the church, and we love each other just like that. And they're coming here actually to say goodbye to me so I could go with you. And he said, no, I know you dated every single one of them, and you probably already slept with them too. And I was like, okay, that's it. That is it. So I kicked him out, and then here we are.
He showed his true color.
He did. He really did. Because before that, I didn't see anything. He was perfect. He was the guy, But when he accused me of these things that, again, these guys were just like my brothers. We took care of each other. We went to each other's basketball games and supported each other like that. And when he said that, I was just beyond upset and hurt. And so I told him, and he apologized.
How you met your husband?
So he called. He was on the phone, talked to my mom for a little bit, and I was on my way out to BYU, and he did come to visit us briefly because he was also close by, and then we both met up at BYU because he was also going to BYU at the time.
And he's Caucasian.
He is
But
6'1".
he speaks Hmong.
He speaks Hmong, and that's why my mom allowed it. Because if he didn't, she would have said
He's
no.
gonna freak out altogether.
Yes.
Is your brother still back in Virginia?
My oldest brother is, yes. And for the longest time, we did not speak, my brother and I, because he was so angry. My dad is he's a very well-known person in my country. He is actually kind of like the equivalent of a mayor even for their villages. And he's just a very kind person overall. He takes care of sick people. Anybody that needs money, he gives it to them. It's not a loan, he gives it to them. Anybody that's having trouble in the community, he just helped them get started on their family, because he grew up basically like an orphan as well. He didn't have a lot of people to teach him, and he taught them a lot. So he's very well known. Even now, if I travel anywhere to like Minnesota or Wisconsin, where there's a lot of Hmong people, and they usually would like to say, okay, who are your parents, who are your grandparents? That's how they can line you up. As soon as I say my dad's name, then they'll say, oh, you're his daughter, we know him. Do you have a question?
You been back?
No, I refuse to go back.
Yeah.
I don't have any good memories of it. And then I heard other people that have gone back, and that it's kind of peaceful now, but they could still extort you for money, take your passport away, and say, hey,
Is it still
Good luck.
communism?
they say that it's not, but I think it still is, because the Hmong people still don't really have a lot there. Nothing, really. And I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful country. It's very green. The temperature, the weather is very much like Hawaii. It's humid, and it's like that. And that's why I like the hot. But I won't go back because I don't have any good memories of it at all.
When your mom you just had this rice and you didn't have anything else but rice? And then you said you did some plants when you didn't have rice. Did she ever have anything else that was just rice and that's what you lived on?
Just rice, and then plants or trees that wasn't poisonous. I mean, we literally eat anything.
Banana leaves. Was there lots of bananas around?
There wasn't a lot of wild bananas, but the bananas that was around you can use. If you cut the inside, if you cut the banana tree open, and you kind of dig into the inside of it, and you leave it overnight, it can make water. But we're not in a place long enough to get the bananas itself, because it takes a season for it to grow and, have bananas on it.
I've always studied evidences of Christ throughout the world and in cultures. And I heard a story years ago about I don't know if it was the Hmong people, but it was in either Thailand or Laos, where there were some elders that they wore kind of like the squash blossom type of necklace with 12, and that they're all separate, and that one of their sages or their leaders several years ago, they said, now we must bring all of them together, and it's time for the gathering to begin, something like that. Are there things in your culture that are ancient truths of, a Christ-like person that came to visit people besides Buddhism or others? What is your tradition?
They know of, they call it, my husband said the name of it is more like animism. We worship our ancestors. And, but there is a story of, I think it's similar to Adam and Eve. They have a place in Laos that they call is the first parents. That's where they lived, and that's, they believe in that. But a lot of the Hmong people are not Christians. They're more of this, they believe in reincarnation, and that your ancestors who has passed away are watching over you. But my dad was always unique. He always believed in anything. I think in the back of his mind, he always believed in God. He just didn't know how to go about it or how to pray or no one taught him that.
I'm just curious, but when you were negotiating a bride price, how does that work? I mean, you're both negotiating your bride price to be married to this person. So what's the tradition of that?
So the traditional one was someone, if you have a father and mother and you come from a good family, they kind of do it for you. But because my dad, was not there, they call it the 12 silver bar bride if you're really good. You come from a good family, you have good background, and you haven't been in prison or anything like that. So the 12 silver bar is the top of the line. So that's what we were talking about.
So do you get that money for you?
It goes to my parents.
Oh.
They call it the, so basically when you marry someone, they bought you in a way. They take you from your family and they've bought you, so you become their possessions. And so you give all these money to your parents, for your parents, taking care of you as a child or helping you to grow up. And so that's why divorce is not an option in a way, because you've been bought. You have to be able to pay that money back if you want to leave the family.
And that didn't happen with you, did it?
No.
Oh, I was going to say, your husband didn't have to give your
No,
mom any silver
he
bars.
didn't. Yes.
So have you discovered a lot of false traditions of your culture?
The reincarnation part of it, but a lot of the other culture, it's very much like our LDS culture, and that's why I embraced it, and it was not hard for me. My husband said that me and the gospel fits like a glove in a hand, because we were taught to keep yourself clean, no drinking, no smoking, no premarital sex, any of that stuff, and just to eat healthy food, all of that. But really the only thing that would be different would be the calling upon the spirit to heal, or more like a shaman, that type of thing will be the only thing is different. But all of the other, in Laos, in our villages, there's not a hotel, there's not a restaurant. Anybody that's passing through our village at night, and if it's dark, they could just knock on anybody's door and say, hey, can we crash for the night? And when they come, you need to be able to feed them dinner and then pack them lunch the next day. And that's what I love about our culture as well.
So your sister that married the guy so that she could go to Thailand, is she still married to him?
No, he passed away just a couple years ago.
But did she stay in Thailand?
No, she came here now. She stayed in Thailand with him because he was kind of in good status in Thailand as well. So even in Thailand, he had a better life than we did because he came to Thailand first. We came later in the game, and so by the time we came, there was already a lot of people in Thailand, and they didn't know what to do with us, because there's these new people that are coming into Thailand and kind of invading their spaces, and so, but the people that came first already kind of had a place, and so they stayed, but they stayed only for a little bit, and then no, not a little bit, more like 10 years later, then the Thai people said, okay, this village or this camp has to go. We have to do something else with the Hmong people. So then the American decided to accept some more, and so that's when my sister came. So she's here as well. She's in Wisconsin.
Oh.
Yeah. Huh?
Did he come with her?
He came with her, but he passed away now. So
Did she join the church too?
she did. She was the one that was able to join, that signed for my sister and I to join.
So
Yes.
Did your husband join the church or no?
No, he never did. Yeah.
How many people were in the camp?
In Thailand? Oh gosh, thousands of them. Yeah, it was a lot.
Housing?
It was, but it was very much like apartment. It was very, very compact. Everybody, a whole family lives in one room place. Yeah.
What did you think of the food when you got here?
I didn't like it.
The variety, but the variety.
Oh, that was wonderful. Another reason why we had to have a sponsor family is because, see, we're farmers. We make whatever we eat, We raise our animals, and we hardly go down to the village, to the city for buying things at all. So coming to the U.S. was overwhelming for some of the elderlies, and it was so overwhelming that they were actually committing suicide. It was just too much. Water running in the home, never heard of. Grocery stores full of food. Bathrooms, yeah, never heard of. So they wanted a family that was already here to kind of teach and say, hey, this is how the water comes through. It's okay. This is where you sleep. You know, this is how you clean this. And that's what they were trying to teach us that way as well.
Did you have electricity?
No, no electricity. Everything was by torches, lights, you know, just fire and things like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we try, and there's no matches, so you have to try to keep your fire burning all the time, just a little bit. So if a neighbor's out, then they have to come to you and say, hey, you know, can we light this up? So that's how the whole village is being led.
How did you start fires when you were running then?
My dad and them with rocks. Yeah, yeah. Sorry.
Well, I lived in Fresno kind of the same time.
Oh.
And because the Hmongs love farming, right? That's what
They do. That
so
they're good at.
everybody, they put them in like Wisconsin or areas that weren't as good. So they would come to where there was warmth, but then,
Yes.
and families would all come together. So we were near the university, we were young married, and anyway, there were a lot of fires because they were trying to cook
Yep.
inside their homes, and so there were fires. And then what happened is it's kind of a crossroads for a lot of gangs. And
Yes.
so the young kids trying to probably survive and money, everything
Yeah.
else, then they got these Hmong gangs against the Asian gangs, against the black gangs,
Yeah.
and you would hear gunfire at night, and I was just like, who are those people? What's going on here? There's fires all the time, and now there's
There
gunshots.
is.
I mean, it must have been horrible for
Yeah.
people trying to do that immigration.
It really was, and it was difficult because you bring these people into a very, very well-versed country like the U.S., you know, where you can have access to anything and everything. In Laos, even the people that have surrendered, anybody could storm through your house any day and say, hey, you die, you live today, we're taking away everything, we can shoot you, and that's the end of it. That's the life of communism, you know? And so here, with these new kids, if they started to have these freedoms of, hey, you need to go to school, hey, this is what you need to do, you learn this, and they're just taking it in, and the parents are a little bit behind time, and they're trying to say, okay, so is that a bad thing, or is that a good thing? And a lot of the times, the gang leaders would say, come, we'll teach you all these things, and this is how you make money, and so you're right.
Yeah.
So then they started, and by the time they realized, wait, what have I got myself into? They got it in deep. So we were fortunate, I guess, well, not even fortunate, but we lived in Virginia where there was not a lot of Hmong people. So we were really just put into the American schools and became them and just stay that way.
So what did you use for ID? My daughter is from China, and she just turned 24, and we do have her Chinese birth certificate, but it's not really accepted here. We've had to readopt her. We've got a rebirth certificate, but we just found out that, I mean, she should have had some picture ID, but we got her passport just this year. But what did you use for ID? I mean, we went through a lot.
We didn't, and that's why I was joking about that. So before we could come here to the U.S., we had to be processed through a paper, and that's when they were saying, okay, we need a birth certificate. And we all were like, there's no such thing. Because, so then we had to make up one. So they go by the moon and the seasons. There's the rice seasons, there's the corn season, there's the rainy season, and then there's the non-rainy seasons. So my oldest brother just kind of guessed. I think they might have gotten the year correct on mine, maybe a year or two off. But the date and the month is definitely just a guess. We had to come up with a birthday.
They didn't even know. They didn't
No.
record anything?
No, nothing was recorded because all the kids were born in the home, just with the parents.
You didn't have a birthday acknowledged that was your day of birth?
No birthday celebrations, nothing. Wow. Yeah. So when
Stone Age.
and very much like that, yeah. No, very, very much.
Wow.
So when people started celebrating, I mean, my first birthday ever was when I turned 18 in high school, and a whole bunch of my friends stuffed my locker with balloons and confettis, and I was like, what are you guys doing? I mean, this is a mess. And they're like, you turn 18. This is a big deal. Come on. And I said, okay. You know, it wasn't a big deal. But I made sure that my kids. And so my birthday is, this is another funny story. On my green card, which I've never seen. We just made it and we came to the U.S. And when I became a citizen, the guy said, okay, take one good look. So we've been celebrating my birthday on May 15th. All of my life is what everybody said. So this is years later when I remarried my husband and I became a citizen, and the guy said, okay, take one good look at your green card again because you'll never see it again. It is going to be gone. You are now a U.S. citizen. And I looked at the green card and it says May 5th, 1971. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been celebrating the wrong date. So I do have some documents floating out there somewhere that says my birthday is still May 15th. So.
Wow, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
So which do you celebrate now? 5th
Well,
or 15th?
my family tease me all the time now. They're like, the month of May is okay, it's good. So we're starting to celebrate the 5th again, but then I try to remember the 15th as well because that's what my friends celebrated in high school, you know, so that meant something to me as well.
Wow. Oh, boy. Thank you. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome. Thank you.
Wow.
Can I make a quick announcement?
Yes.
Because after hearing Shoua's story, I just want to just put out this, Glenn Beck has just made an announcement that there are 5,000 Christians in Afghanistan, and he's trying to raise $20 million in the next 2 days to get them out. If we don't get them out, you know what they're going to go through. And Boris Johnson of England just came out and announced that they are going to acknowledge the Taliban as the new government of Afghanistan. Biden hasn't said that yet. But if you have any availability to help Glenn Beck get these people out, you go to thenazareanfund.org.
It
He
crashed.
said, yes, keep trying. He
Oh.
said
You
even
can go to
$1.
Mercury
If we
One.
get
Yeah,
20
Mercury One,
million
yeah.
people could
Mercury
give
One.
$1, we
Yeah.
could get these people out.
Yeah, he said any amount.
Any amount.
Okay.
So the
Every penny goes to the fund.
NazareanFund.org.
Nobody makes
Because we
any
know
of it.
what they are about to go through hearing this
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
Yes, I've been keeping up with the news, and it breaks my heart.
Afghanistan is-
One of my friends just reached out yesterday and said, please pray for so-and-so. He was the interpreter for her husband, who was an attorney. And I said, you got it. And we started praying, and she just texted last night and said, thank you so much. He is on the plane. So my husband and I were just talking about this morning. He said, are you ready to, go do your presentation? And I said, I don't know, it's a little bit hard right now because I'm here. I'm very grateful to be here, but I know exactly what they're going through. That's exactly how it happened for us, because as soon as the American soldiers were pulling out, they didn't just pull out. They did say, we can take as many as we can to fit into these planes. And they were not coming back. And so people were doing the exact same thing. They were climbing on, trying to get on, but we didn't even have that chance because we were not even nearby.
Well, in this group, we've had a lot of discussions about that maybe you see that the tares are getting terrier and the wheat, is the wheat getting wheatier? Like Neil Maxwell used to say. But I just think this is a perfect exercise of our faith, like fasting and prayer. In another group I'm with, we're going to do a group fast. But I just have a testimony that, like, we have the covenant and we have the temple blessings, and we are a body of women of faith, and to have fierce faith, to call angels and bless those people to have those experiences like you had, and to be watched over. And I know there's a lot of Muslims that have been having near-death experiences and dreams about Christ and seeing Him, and there's something happening with the time of the Gentiles going to the world and claiming His family, because we know that's what the elder brother, Jesus Christ, is calling His family home. And any of those hearts, like, there's a reason why this is happening, and it's not justifiable. But anyway, I just wanted to say that if you want to do a group fast.
Absolutely.
And pray for those angels and to call down help from heaven for those people. And when is your prayer heaven? Well, I started one today, but we can do one whenever.
Prayers work, you guys. It really
Or
does.
is there not time? I'm just
I'm
thinking.
thinking start now.
Yeah.
And also, can we just include all the veterans that have served?
Yep. No, they're very dear to my heart as well, because It's because of them that I'm here, and because they're standing on the wall, that we are safe here, you guys. We are so, so, so lucky. I'm 50, but I've seen so much death in my lifetime that I think I'm done with it. But it's because of people like that out there. They're protecting our freedom, and they're protecting us. I came from a place where I didn't have any protection. It was my family and against everybody else. But here, we're strong. We have the gospel, and we have the veterans out there. We have the soldiers that are now protecting us. And just to go with that, prayer does work. 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with breast cancer when my son was on a mission. And I knew that prayer worked, but I didn't need any prayer because I was okay. But at that time, it was something that was happening to me that I didn't have any control over. I could have died. I knew maybe my time was up. But the ward prayed every day for me. My young women prayed every day for me. And literally, I felt the Savior saying, I got you. I'm right here. I can't do it for you, but I'm with you. And there are times where I got back from chemo and I was so sick that I would just say, I can't do this anymore. Just take me away. I can't. And I literally would get a text right there and then. He knew that a little fuzzy feeling wasn't going to do it because I was so sick. I would get a text from my friend and say, hey, I've been thinking about you today, and I just put your name on the Trample prayer roll. You can feel that prayer. So I know that prayer works. It really does. And I am very grateful for them. And we should keep them in our prayers as well. Pretty short. Yes.
Yeah, this is
Hi.
very good.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me come. This is